This lecture has been made available to you courtesy of the American Numismatic Society.
It is my incredible pleasure to introduce Dr. Jérémy Artru, who received his PhD in ancient history from the University of Orléans under the supervision of Professor Arnaud Sopin and Professor Frédéric Durand. His dissertation is titled Carthage, Coinage and History from the Conquest of Selinunte to the Libyan War, so 409 to 235 BCE, 37 BCE. Since 2023, he's been a scientific member of the École française de Rome, so the French school in Rome, with a project on the emergence and diffusion of coinage in the Punic War, so 5th to 3rd century BCE. And he has a specific interest in ancient coin fabrication techniques and metallurgical analysis. And he has already published several papers on this subject with a specific focus on the monetary and economic relationship and interactions between Sicily and Carthage. And this is his last contribution, I can see on the review numismatic. So congratulations, Jérémy, here.
Thank you.
Really. So, and with this, I will give you the stage, Jérémy, please.
Thank you very much.
Oh, and this is Professor Morrison is showing exactly the latest article published by Dr. Artru on the latest review numismatic. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. I guess I share my screen now.
Yes, please. Great.
Okay. Thank you very much, Lucia, and thanks to all of you. I'm really pleased to have this opportunity to present to you some aspects and some results of my research, which obviously focuses on the coinage and the history of Carthage and the Punic world. Let me begin briefly with just reviewing some essential chronological and geographical points. Carthage, as you know, was founded on the coast of modern Tunisia by Phoenicians from Tyre. And this foundation is traditionally dated to 814 BC. The city's influence grew considerably, and a few centuries later, in the 6th century BC, it held a distinctly preeminent position within the Western Phoenician world. And the map here shows, yes, it's slightly simplified, obviously, but some highlights of the area under direct control of the Carthaginian, control of or an influence that could take various forms, actually. But it's quite an important region, and the map obviously concerns only the period that will be the focus of this presentation. As you will see, the focus will be placed, owing to the particular characteristics of the documentation, on what may be described as the central part of the Punic world, situated between present-day Tunisia, Sardinia, and Sicily. And maybe I can just take this, yes. So, Carthaginian coinage, no. Carthaginian coinage constitutes a large-scale and very varied production. The first coins struck by the Carthaginians were silver tetradrachms issued in Sicily at the very end of the 5th century. It's there's coins here. And after an interruption of more than half a century, the production of such tetradrachms resumed in the middle of the 4th. And at approximately the same time, Carthage also began striking gold and bronze. And this trimetallic coinage continued through a succession of emission periods of varying intensity and interruption period of varying duration until the destruction of the city by the Roman, as you know, in 146 BC. And obviously, all this coinage it's a big subject. It's a lot, and the present presentation will be confined to the period I have examined most closely, which is between the beginning of the Carthaginian coinage, as I said, and the end of the First Punic War in 241. And to allow for greater detail, the focus here will be placed on gold coinage only. And through it should not be forgotten that obviously this coinage was part of a wider and more intricate system. We will have the opportunity to return to this a bit later. So, Carthaginian gold coinage is often considered relatively well known and understood, largely owing to the work of Gilbert Kenneth Jenkins, and above all, to his landmark volume co-authored with Richard Levis in 1963, Carthaginian golden electrum coins. And I guess you all know this book, and that study remains very, very important, and its lasting impact on Punic numismatics ensures that it will be cited repeatedly here. However, this work is now somewhat dated. Its corpus is far from complete, as we will see, and obviously recent tools and methodologies make it possible to advance our understanding considerably. In the study, Jenkins and Lewis distinguished 18 groups. Today, the classification can be refined as will be seen. In the book, based on my doctoral thesis, which is now in the process of publication, and to which I will return in a moment, a different arrangement and numbering have been proposed, but for reason of convenience here, since this classification of Jenkins and Lewis remains the best known at present, the reference here will also be made to these groups for Jenkins and Lewis, while specifying the extent to which adjustments may be introduced. And I hope that this will remain sufficiently clear. Of course, in addition, Jenkins and Lewis offered, there were a lot of other works, but it was only on some coins, some series, I think, on the works of Mildenberg, Visona, for instance, but no large-scale investigation of the subject had been undertaken prior to my PhD dissertation. And another important point is that Jenkins and Lewis offered very little by way of historical interpretation and precise contextualization of the coinage. And I think that this is obviously the very, very important point, and the question of the purpose of the production in particular was only touched upon. So we will see what we can do. Yes, no, I would like to finish with this one. I would like to briefly outline some key points regarding my doctoral thesis, and I thank again Lucia for her introduction. This thesis was completed at the University of Orléans in France and defended a year and a half ago. And it seems important to me because obviously it provides the very basis for today's communication. This thesis addressed the full spectrum of Carthaginian coinage in precious metals, gold, so-called electrum, we will see a bit about that in a moment, and silver. And was covering the period from the very first coins at the end of the 5th century, sorry, to the end of the first Punic War. And its purpose was not only to offer a comprehensive numismatic analysis aimed at better understanding Carthage's coin production policies, but also to shed important historical light, particularly through written sources. And in this work, I had the opportunity to re-examine Carthaginian gold coinage in detail, applying a methodology as exhaustive as possible, looking at typology, metrology, and circulation, of course, carrying out die studies, but also exploring less common aspects, let's say, notably the archaeometric dimension and the study of coin production techniques. And I would like to develop just for a moment on these 2 points. Yes, the method that was used for the analysis of the coin was the LAICPMS, so laser ablation inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometry. It's a method that is now quite well known, developed in Orléans some decades ago, and it's a method that presents some important advantages. I try to synthesize it here. First of all, it's high analytical precision. We can reach the parts per million level, and it's obviously very important when we try to look at the trace elements. It's not a surface method. We access to the metal core below a potentially altered and enriched surface. And this is quite seen here. We can see that this is the gold and silver content over time, and it's a direct laser ablation. So over time means in the depth of the coin, and we can see, obviously, we will see why that at the beginning we analyze the very near surface, and we have a result that is very different from the core. Yes, so this is the point I was developing, and last but not least, obviously, it's a quasi non-invasive sampling, invisible to the eye because the laser spot diameter is only 70 micrometers. Obviously, I can't avoid to mention this important publication 2 years ago, because some of the elements linked to the elemental composition of Carthaginian coins that I will present to you today are part of the 2 of my contributions in this important book that was published after a conference that were held in Orleans some years ago. And if you are interested in gold coinage, in gold in the antiquity, and on this question of analysis of ancient gold, I think that this could be of great interest. So the question of analysis of composition makes it necessary to clarify at the beginning a little bit the terminology used. And as I said, I refer to these coins as gold coinage, gold coins, even though it has long been established over 2 centuries that most Carthaginian coins were in fact struck in a gold-silver alloy. The specimen analyzed here, for instance, is the same that in the previous slide. This specimen contains nearly equal proportion of the 2 metals. This is why scholars often speak of Carthaginian electrum. Yet, I have to say that I'm not convinced that this term that is appropriate for archaic coinages of the Eastern Mediterranean, for instance, fits the Carthaginian context, because as we will as will be seen, the Carthaginians exercise strict control over the gold content of the coinage. This gold content cover a wide range, and it seems, in fact, that the Carthaginians have done everything possible to make these issues look like gold, and particularly by enriching the gold on the surface of the coins. And this is what I intend to show you with these examples. We can see that the whole seems quite the same. Obviously, this one is a little bit pale, let's say, but the gold content is very different, and we will see that there is a very, very specific Carthaginian characteristic in the production of these coins. And in addition, no ancient source supports the notion of a distinct electrum coinage in Carthage, separate from both gold and silver. And for these reasons, I prefer the more neutral designation gold coinage, which may in practice include alloyed gold, gold-silver alloyed, but allows the entire corpus to be studied together. And we will see it more in detail in a moment, obviously. As Lucia said previously, my focus also extends to coin production techniques, both by examining the traces left on the coins themselves and through experimental work. I will show a few examples here, and for those interested, this is a subject that I had the pleasure to present a few years ago in an ANS money talk alongside my colleagues Caroline Carrier and Thomas Fauché, and I'm sure this could still be found on YouTube. So for the rest of this talk, after this somewhat lengthy introduction, I will outline in chronological order key aspects of Carthaginian gold coin production, and the emphasis will be on developments compared to Jenkins' work, obviously, while relying a lot on his work, as we will see. And the purpose, the mean of the production will also receive particular attention, as we will see. So let's begin. According to the classification of Jenkins and Lewis, Carthaginian gold coinage originated in the first half of the 4th century with these 2 series. These 2 series, however, raise numerous issues. The main one being that they are represented by only 2 and 3 specimens respectively, making them extremely poorly documented and marginal emissions. Paolo Visona has suggested that Group 1 should in fact be placed sometime toward the end of the 4th or the beginning of the 3rd century on account of iconographic parallels with the bronze coinage and the use of the Phoenician shekel standard. This remains uncertain, but it does not appear impossible to me. As for Group 2, it may have been issued in the middle of the 4th century, perhaps in Sicily, but once again, this is highly uncertain at present, and the matter is therefore left open until such time as the documentation may become more substantial. But the thing is that these 2 series are really marginal, and in fact, yes, it is these coins constituting the very large Group 3 of Jenkins and Lewis that truly mark the beginning of the Carthaginian gold coinage. This is a very remarkable series comprising 5 denominations, a unit known as the stater, weighing 9.4 grams, and its fractions. Production seems to have been on massive scale, with 274 others dies recorded, mostly for staters, and to a lesser degree for 10th and 5th staters. But even with updated data, as you can see on the table, even with updated data, the corpus remains only partially representative, since the average number of coins per others die is relatively low, and this is true for all the denomination, and it's true in particular for the most important denomination, the stater. So the dies may have been of limited productivity. We will see why maybe in a moment, but significant uncertainties persist concerning the actual volumes of the production. This is important. And sadly, these uncertainties combine with a considerable heterogeneity in the characteristics of this series. Differences appear both in engraving style, as you can see, and in the application of control marks. And these control marks are usually arranged as clusters of three dots, 3 pellets, through many variants exist, as illustrated here. You can see that there could be 3 pellets, 3 dots near to the hexagline, but there could also be only 1 pellet in diverse positions. So it seems very varied. Close attention to the traces left by corn production techniques reveals considerable variety too. I cannot dwell here on each in detail, yet all provide obviously valuable evidence for the processes of flan preparation, dye production, and obviously striking. But just to illustrate some examples here, in some cases, we can see some protrusions on the edges, on the 2 opposite points on the edges. That could be the result from the production of spherical flans, as we can see in Sicily at that time. In other coins, we can see impressions of the die edge that appears on the obverse of the coins, which is a very rare feature in Greek numismatics of this period. And that, yes, it's worth noting it. And finally, there are some very distinctive cracks, small linear cracks that can be seen, apparently due to a particular form of die deterioration, which may well account for their potentially limited productivity, as I said before. But obviously, this is just an hypothesis. But it's interesting to note that it's very common on the coins of this series, and only this one for the Carthaginian gold coinage, to observe these very thin cracks. I continue with the results of archaeometric analysis, which first reveal a certain heterogeneity in gold content, obviously already identified by Jenkins. Proportions this content, ranging from approximately 96% to 91%, with a coin with less than 88%. The rest of the alloy consists of silver. This is gold of rather poor quality when compared with the standards of contemporary Greek coin production, but in fact of relatively good quality in light of what will be observed in a moment. As previously noted, LAICPMS analyses also make it possible to determine the trace element content of these alloys, and trace elements that are present only in very, very small quantities, a few tens or hundreds of parts per million. And when considering the chemical signature of gold, platinum and palladium are among the most relevant elements to examine. Indeed, these traces elements are good indicators of the stocks employed and are highly resistant to metallurgical operation, which makes them excellent traces of the metal. In the graphs shown here, platinum and palladium values are normalized against gold content, allowing coins of very different gold fineness to be compared one with another directly. And in this case, in this precise case, the result makes it clear that no overall pattern emerges. The Carthaginians appear to have used multiple gold stocks, each with distinct chemical signatures and probably different origins. But by combining all this data, 4 main subgroups can emerge within this cell. And I only identified 4 subgroups compared with the 8 identified by Jenkins and Lewis. I think that was a little bit too much. We will see why in a moment. Control mark, placement, and style provide fairly reliable distinguishing features, though they are not sufficient on their own. Because returning to the results of the elemental analysis, interesting trends can also be observed when the data are compared against the subgroups defined. The results must, of course, be treated with caution, since only a limited number of coins could be analyzed, but they remain of considerable interest. in particular, with respect to gold content, relatively clear grouping can be noted, and possibly a trend toward decreasing gold content from group B to group D, likely over time. And clear trends can also be highlighted in terms of trace elements, and therefore regarding the metal stocks employed. And the confused picture that we saw previously is maybe a little bit clearer when we look at the groups, obviously. And we can see here, for instance, we still have very limited number of coins, but it's interesting because we can see here with a very low platinum content and a very irregular palladium content, the status of groups A and B. The status of group C, the three analyzed, are formed kind of a cluster here, and the status of group D are another composition, which another signature, which is a little bit between the two other. And it's interesting to note also that 5th and 10th status are very consistent in this trend here, with a very low palladium content and a very irregular platinum content. So we can see that here with this analysis, we can see a little bit further, obviously. And the same approach can be applied to other data, treating information related to manufacturing, to fabrication traces statistically. And this remains a fairly experimental approach, but it appears promising, I think, in certain cases. Here, for instance, it is noteworthy that beyond the metal itself, the techniques also seem to have evolved from one subgroup to another. And the most striking case, I think, concerns the protrusions on the edges that I talked about previously, that can be, as I said, linked with the contemporary Sicilian techniques. These traces are observed in half of the specimens of subgroup B, and almost never in the other. So it's clearly interesting to look at this kind of features. We can do the same. It's a little bit less interesting for the obvious die edges and the die damage cracks. This could be interesting too. There are some very interesting differences, but it's obviously still on this point a work in progress, because it's still difficult to link these traces with a very specific technique, a very specific codes. So we are therefore dealing with a large, highly heterogeneous series, which still presents many difficulties, as we have seen. In any case, it gives the impression of having been produced over a period that could have been relatively long. But it's not so simple, once again, because the study of coin finds this time does not seem to support this view. Why? Because while the analysis is complicated by the nature of the documentation, it is mainly poorly documented hoards. It is still interesting to note that in several well-established cases, even recent cases, all four subgroups were hoarded together, and there are some examples, a lot of them actually, where we can see two 3 subgroups together, and in some cases, the 4 of them. So consequently, this evidence does not provide a firm relative chronology, which must rely mainly on production characteristics. It is, however, worth noting that these coins were predominantly hoarded in Sardinia and to a lesser extent in Tunisia and Sicily. And this is significant as it contrasts very sharply with contemporary Carthaginian silver coinage in Sicily, which never circulate beyond the island. So I will conclude this with this first series, on which I have deliberately spent the most time because it seems of considerable interest and remains obscure in certain respects, and it's a perfect example of the way in which we can apply this kind of exhaustive methodology. So I will conclude with a brief reflection on absolute chronology and the purpose of such production. This is obviously a complex subject, which I will only present briefly, but the dating proposed by Jenkins and Lewis between 350 and 320 seems both too high and too long to me. This is also the view of other specialists, such as Paolo Visona that I mentioned earlier, and we have to move on the purpose. And on the purpose, scholars tend to consider that this coinage was intended for commercial purposes, in contrast to the silver coinage struck in Sicily, which had a clearly military objective. And I have to say that this does not seem the most probable hypothesis to me, neither, because the low number of certain denominations, the uncertainties regarding the duration of production, the relatively limited circulation, and even the chosen standard appear to contradict this idea of primarily commercial purpose. And it seems more likely that these coins were also, just as the silver coins, intended to fund military expenditure, probably in the context of conflicts of which our sources preserve only very, very scarce traces. This could concern, for instance, operations carried out in Africa and Sicily and Sardinia, not Sicily, around 330 and 310 BC, briefly mentioned by certain authors, but authors who paid obviously far less attention to these events than to the Sicilian affairs. And I think that this is maybe a key to understand why we have some difficulties to understand this series that have also a military purpose, but military purpose which is not Sicilian. We can now move a little bit further with the end of the first series and its transition to the next. And this is, I'm afraid, also not very clear. It is certain in any case that this series, the group 4 of Jenkins and Lewis, occupies an intermediate, a transitional position, because we can obviously see the link, the typology. There are still these dots as control marks, but the Carthaginian changed the weight standard, and from the stater of 9.4 grams, we go to the Punic shekel of 7.6 grams. The other very important feature is the lower gold content, which is now around 75%. And this transition, this trend becomes even more clearer with the following group, the group 5 of Jenkins and Lewis, which continues directly from the preceding group. It continues directly, obviously, in iconography and style, also this time with the way standard, the exact same typology as I said, and most important, and this is a thing that appears with the new corpus, the dialing between the end of the group and the group 5. So we have a very, very close connection between these two, and this close connection can be seen also in the composition, the signature of the metal, the signature of the gold. And this is interesting because obviously you remember the very, very diverse signature of the group 3, and the group 4 and 5 are precisely where the last coins of group 3 were. So there is a continuity and there is some consistency with this new gold stock used by the Carthaginian for this new series. It's also interesting to note that with this group 5, we have a complete different situation regarding the corpus. And we have a corpus that is way better than the one of Jenkins and Lewis. And it wasn't the case for the group 3. So that's the reason why I emphasized a little bit on this. We have a very, very good representation of the corpus. And this is very interesting because I think that this series, this series have very different features, and we will see what they are. So I go a little bit faster on this, but we can identify in this group 5 a very consistent, very closely controlled production with 4 groups. And the interesting thing, again, and I'm sorry for this image that is not very clear and very easy to read, but this is a result of the dye study. And even if Jenkins and Lewis thought that there were dye links between the different subgroups, in fact, it's not the case. And after a lot of control and verification, it's not the case. There is no link between the different subgroups, but there are a lot of important links inside them. So it's a very very consistent, very important production, and this group may have been produced not successively, but in parallel. All the evidence here, and especially dye studies, elemental analysis, and hole pattern, points to production over a very short lifetime, in stark contrast to the broad period suggested by Jenkins and Lewis. And I think that these coins, yes, were struck only in a few months, or at most a few years. And this is interesting because, as you can see here, I didn't comment it before, but you can see that once again, with this group 5 here in green, we have a very, very different pattern of circulation and hoarding. And the overall chronology, I think, is derived from the joint circulation of these coins in Eastern Sicily and the Brutium, with Agathocles coinage, which also include alloy gold issue, but I will pass on this. The only plausible context for this coinage seems to me to be Agathocles' presence in Africa, and possibly toward the end of this period, particularly linked to Carthage paying its own troops and notably soldiers recruited from the tyrant's forces. And this is in the very final phases of the conflict, and in the years between 308, sorry, and 306. And I think that this is a very specific and important point, because unlike the two preceding groups, these coins appear mainly to have circulated beyond Carthage's sphere of influence and were ordered shortly thereafter, probably in the context of Agathocles' wars with the Greek in eastern Sicily and in the Bruttium. And another clue on this point, I think, is that on these coins, we can find a lot of graffiti, and mostly graffiti of Greek letters. And here again, we have some kind of a Greek context, Greek, yes, obviously it's a wider subject, but we have something very different from the previous gold coins here. To conclude briefly on this period, I just want to show you this, obviously not gold, but silver coins that were struck at the exact same moment between the years 315 and 305. And this is another important subject, the dating of these coins is also different from the Jenkins thought, but it's interesting to note that these coins were a very massive production in Sicily, while Carthage also struck gold coins in Africa for, in both cases, military expenditures, but a little bit different. In one case, on one hand, in Sicily to pay Sicilian soldiers, and on the other, it's the continuation of this gold struck in Africa to fit with very specific military needs that are not directly linked with the Sicilian war, or to be more precise, not directly linked with the payment in Sicily. So the end of the 4th century is the most important, the most intense period of production for, I think, all the Carthaginian coinage. And this is important to have this in mind. It's not a slow evolution in the production of these coins. It's a very intense moment. It's a sporadic production. And it's quite clear when we arrive, and very briefly, to the last period, because we can note that there were a sharp break that occurred after Group 5 that is struck until the peace between Carthage and Agathocles in 305 BC. And we don't know exactly when the production start again, but the next series corresponds to these groups 6 and 7 of Jenkins and Lewis. And it's interesting because we have another very different heterogeneous feature, heterogeneous, gold stocks, less consistent control mark system, a few dialings. So it's still something different, and I think that this is something that, yes, it's something different from the previous group. And overall, this represents a period of production likely longer in duration, but which may nonetheless have occurred in several successive sporadic episodes. And it is difficult to determine precisely, obviously due to limited information on circulation and hoarding, due to limited sources, written sources. But most data concern the First Punic War. And a few observations from earlier, maybe the war against Pyrrhus probably represents a brief but intense and significant period of production, that it's difficult to quantify the detail, and there is less, very few information on these coins. But yes, there may have been other striking occasions, but it is uncertain. And I think that most of these coins are coins at the early First Punic War, and this is another important point. These coins are struck at the beginning of the First Punic War, and the reform of the system with this group 10 is something that occurred during the war, not at the beginning, but during the war, to answer new difficulties, new problem, because once again, this involves a prolonged war, a long war, which is something that is quite unusual for the Carthaginians. And yeah, just to finish, these coins, there were obviously during the First Punic War other theories. So there are a system that is quite consistent, but also different groups that seems more marginal, but tend to answer very specific, to fit very specific financial needs. And this may be the case of these very exceptional coins. They are very rare, large and heavy coins that were probably struck directly in Sicily. But as you can see, it's not like the Sicilian tetrarchs before. It is something different. It is something that bear all these Carthaginian features, all this the Carthaginian that have adopted adapted also the coin production with the shekel system, with the iconography, the style, which are very different from the Sicilian coins, the earlier Sicilian coins. So I have been too long. Also, I guess I'm sorry, but yes, it was uneven. Obviously, I spent a lot of time of the first coins because I really wanted to try to show you this method and the comparison of these diverse methodologies, technical points, archaeometrical points, and try to think and to process all this data with a reflection of more broad perspective, and try to reflect not only in terms of internal organization, but also in terms of purpose of the production. And if I would say the last word, it would be this. I think that the most important thing that seems from this work is that we have a production that seems way more sporadic than we thought it was before. This is the first point. Second point is that it seems linked very closely with the military context, even when we don't have a lot of information on this context, because obviously we have lost all information about the wars that Carthage had in Sardinia, had in Africa, but there were wars and there were financial needs also in these wars, not only in Sicily. So yes, I think we have to try to figure the things this way. And yeah, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jérémy. This was great. And I have already one question for you in the chat. Then I have a few questions, but let's see, there are also questions, I hope, from the audience. Otherwise, I have questions for you. So Eric Krauss asks, with which Jenkins and Lewis groups is surface enrichment observed?
Thank you very much for this question. It's really interesting, and if I can just go a little bit further, no, back here, yes. In fact, it's characteristics that can be seen on almost all the Carthaginian gold silver alloy series, and from the point where there is a quantity of silver that is high enough to change the color, and it appears between these two groups, we can see here that there is some points that are a little pale, a little bit pale, and group 5, group 6, group 7, and in fact, all the other groups struck in Carthage show this very specific feature, very interesting feature too. It's something I'm currently working on from also from experimental point of view, because this is a key element to understand the value of the coins, obviously to estimate what could have been paid with these coins. So yes, it's a very, very huge phenomenon, not only on one group.
Thank you. We have one question from Professor Morisson, if you want to ask it directly, and then we have another question on the chat. Yes. No, you are muted. No. She
okay.
can.
No,
Yes.
okay. It's just a question that Mike Markovitz was asking on the chat. Have you any idea, Jérémy, about the source of the mineral? Because there are silver mines in Sardinia, but I think there might have been gold, and there is also gold attested in eastern Sicily. Well, what are your ideas? Because you are such a profound researcher, and by the way, I'm entirely convinced by your demonstration of the sporadic and military purpose of coinage.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Cecile. And it's another very important question. And obviously, I would like to explain all of this, but it's a lot. And I think that obviously, as you know, it's difficult to link a signature, to link yes, chemical signature to a precise stock and to a precise origin. But to be brief, there is something that I tried. It's the African hypothesis. The hypothesis that Carthage is in Africa. Carthage is a commercial city. Carthage can access all this gold that is this sub-Saharan gold. I think it doesn't work, and it doesn't work for a lot of reasons. And I published, if some of you are interested, a very short paper in French in the Bulletin de la Société Française de Numismatique in 2019 of this very specific question of the African provenance. But this is this doesn't work because we can see that the composition is very Mediterranean. It fits the Sicilian, it fits the Syracusan gold, and I think that we have to look for a provenance in the Mediterranean and in the Western Mediterranean. I have two main ideas. I think that Sardinia could be an idea, clearly, because Sardinia is a very important part, very closely controlled by the Carthaginian, but there are not so much gold. And obviously Spain. Spain could be another clue.
What about Egypt? Have you asked Donna?
So I tried, but I look, obviously, because there are a lot of analyses of Egyptian, of Lagid coins that have precisely the same chronology. And what we can see, what you can tell is that this is a very different signature. It is a very different signature. And there are a lot more platinum in the Egyptian stock as in the other Persian, let's say, gold stocks. And so yes, and it's difficult because I think that at the beginning the Carthaginians doesn't have a proper and unique way of getting some precise gold, but with the other groups we can see a very, very important change and a very close and consistent signature. And I think that this is the signature we have to look for, because this trend here is very diffused in all the Western Mediterranean. The coins of Syracuse, the coins of Tarentum are all in this trend with very low palladium content and a quite wide range of platinum content. But this is a very specific signature, and it appears in Carthage, and we only found it in some Syracusan coins from the Agathocles time. So it's obviously directly linked. But no, I think not Egypt. I'm sorry for this long answer, but Spain and Sardinia may be interesting.
Okay.
So I have a lot of other questions for you, but perhaps we will have a separate email. Thank you again for this incredibly interesting presentation. And now exactly it's past 2 p.m. So thank you to you. So we'll leave you and all our European guests to their Friday night. And we go back exactly to our afternoon here in the US. So thank you again. This was
Thank you very much.
Thank you
very much.
Really.
It was my pleasure. And if anyone has any question, please do not hesitate to contact me by email. It would be my pleasure. And yes, there are some other publication if you are interested, you can find some more detailed.
Some of them.
Yes, some information. Yes.
Because I saw, of course, some of these publications are your publications are on academia now, of course, on the Revue Numismatique.
Yes.
Please, I'm personally interested in knowing when you're going to publish and where you're going to publish your dissertation. But
it will be published in the École française de Rome collection. And it's a work in progress, but I hope that the manuscript can be sent in the next month, and the publication will follow as soon as possible. I hope, but yeah.
Okay, so congratulations again. Good luck with the submission of the manuscript. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is.
And
Thank you very much.
we really hope to read your book as soon as possible. Okay.
Thank you very much,
Bye-bye.
and good afternoon.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.